963, and a dude who happened to be count in the Ardennes decides to trade much of his ancestral lands near Furlen, it's here, with the Abbey of Saint Maximin in Trier in return for the Bacrock, a rocky promontory and its immediate surrounding areas. The guy was called Siegfried, youngest of his family, by the way, and he built or rebuilt a fortress on top of the rock and called it Luxembourg, or if you translated, Little Castle. So Siegfried the First, and by the way, whenever we use numbers, the first number is always going to be the Luxembourgish count. So Siegfried the First was the first Siegfried of Luxembourg, so first of his name. And the second number is going to be the number that they're most known for. So Siegfried the First became the first ruler of Luxembourg, actually not being an official count, but just a person who owned the place, or a lord. When he died, the ownership went to his son, Henry I. Henry I had no children, so when he died, the ownership went to Henry II, his nephew, who was son of Frederick of Luxembourg. Then in 1047, the ownership went to his brother, Gisibert, and then in 1059, it went to Gisibert's son, Conrad I, who was the first official Count of Luxembourg. Then the throne went to Conrad I's son, Henry III, which 10 years later, the throne was given to his other son, William I. Then the throne went to William I's son, Conrad II, and then Conrad II didn't have any children. So it went to Henry IV, the son of Ermesinda of Luxembourg, who was the daughter of Conrad I. Now, Henry IV was special because he was the longest ruler of Luxembourg ever. He reigned for 60 years over Luxembourg from 1136 to the 14th of August, 1196, unmatched by anyone, and he lived in the 12th century, when people still thought it was a good idea to release blood to let the bad spirits out when someone got sick. Insane. Now, in his life, Henry IV waged a lot of wars. Well, anyone did, but he waged especially a lot of wars. His Wikipedia page is filled with stories about him warring, and his only daughter and child, Ermesinda II, married to Theobald, Count of Bar. Since Henry IV didn't have any male heirs, his lands and titles went back to the Holy Roman Emperor, because under feudalism, the emperor had complete ownership of all the lands in the country. He just leased them out to certain people he trusted, which then gave the lands to their sons upon their deaths, because it was easier that way. And the Holy Roman Emperor decided to give Luxembourg to his brother, Otto. But Otto wasn't really important, because only a year later, Ermesinda, along with her husband, got Luxembourg back from Otto. Ermesinda II reigned as Countess of Luxembourg for 50 years, being the sole ruler for 21 of them because 2 of her husbands died. She ruled until she died, where the throne went to Henry V the Blonde, her son. Then the throne passed to Henry VI to Henry VII, who became actually the first Holy Roman Emperor of the House Luxembourg in 1308. Well, actually, he was coronated in 1312, but okay, whatever, he was in charge. Then he had a son named John. And remember when I explained how feudalism worked like 30 seconds ago? Well, the same thing happened in the Kingdom of Bohemia, where there was a major succession crisis, where there was no male heir, so since Bohemia fully belonged to Holy Roman Emperor Henry VII, he could do whatever he wanted with it, in theory. And he decided to wed his 14-year-old son to a Bohemian princess that was coincidentally next in line to the throne, and make him king of Bohemia in 1311 at age 14. So, now I kind of feel even worse about myself for accomplishing nothing. Then John's father died, making him Count of Luxembourg as well, in 1313. He spent most of his life in France and Luxembourg, though, while leaving the ruling of Bohemia to his barons. And while he was in Luxembourg, he improved it very much and ruled very effectively, which is why a lot of people regard him as a Luxembourgish hero. He also founded the Schubert, an event which still very much exists today somehow, after 600 years. It was founded in 1340. John's son, though, Charles I or the Fourth, spent most of his time in Bohemia, embracing his Czech side, since it was believed that his mother was descended from saints. He was also the first Bohemian or Holy Roman Emperor, by the way. But his reign was harder than most, because at the time, the Black Death was a thing. He was much more preoccupied with ruling the Empire in Bohemia rather than his other territories, so he gave Luxembourg to his brother Wenceslaus in 1353, who became Count of Luxembourg, and Moravia to his other brother, John Henry. Also, during Wenceslaus' reign, Luxembourg was elevated to a duchy. So, nice. Wenceslaus. The first died childless, so Wenceslaus. The second son of Charles got the throne. Then when he died childless, he gave the throne to his cousin Jobst, who was the son of John Henry Margrave of Moravia. Actually, I just realized I've been pronouncing Moravia wrong. It's actually Moravia, but okay, you get the picture. Then Jobst didn't have any kids, so he gave the Luxembourgish throne to the granddaughter of Charles, Elizabeth, who also didn't have any kids. Now at this point, the influence of the House of Luxembourg was rapidly waning, since few people in it were producing male heirs. So even though there was a serious contender to the Luxembourgish throne, Anne of Austria, who was the great-granddaughter of Charles, Elizabeth just opted to sell Luxembourg to a country that was almost fully surrounding it and would have probably conquered it anyways if she hadn't sold it. And that country was the Duchy of Burgundy. Thus, Philip I, or III, took the crown and throne of Luxembourg in 1443, forever ending the era where Luxembourg was ruled by the House of Luxembourg. Which is kinda sad, not gonna lie. While Philip I, or III, was the great-grandson of Bonne, who was the daughter of John of Bohemia, so he had the family right to the throne. When he died, Charles the Bold took the crown, but only had one daughter, Mary the Rich, and no male heirs. So when he died, a part of his country got eaten up by France, and the rest was constantly fought over. So Mary the Rich had to marry a very influential person who would protect her duchy, so she married possibly the most influential person at the time, Maximilian Habsburg. And you know what that means? It's time for... The couple had a son, Philip II or I, whom the crown went to in 1482. Then it went to Charles III or V, then to Philip III or II or I, then to Isabella Clara Eugenia, who received the Spanish Netherlands as kind of a gift from her dad. She had no kids, so the throne went to her nephew Philip IV, which also syncs up Spanish Philip numbers to Luxembourgish Philip numbers, because Luxembourg skipped a Philip here. Then the throne went to Charles IV the Bewitched. He had no kids, so left his thrones to Philip V, who was of the House of Bourbon. So the fact that Charles IV made Philippe, the grandson of Louis XIV, as his heir, upset pretty much everyone in Europe, since that would make Spain an ally with France. So entered the War of the Spanish Succession, during which Luxembourg was given to Bavaria by France for a short while. Specifically, Maximilian II of Bavaria got the Luxembourgish throne in 1712. But at the end of the War of the Spanish Succession, he was forced to give Luxembourg and the Spanish Netherlands to Austria. So, you know what that means. The throne went to Charles V or VI, Holy Roman Emperor. He had the family claim because his great-great-grandfather was the son of Philip II. After Charles V came Maria Theresa, who took the throne in 1740. Afterwards came her son Joseph I or II, then his brother Leopold I or II, then Leopold's son Francis I or II. And after Francis came the French Republic and Napoleon. So around this time, France had a revolution where they got rid of their king, and everyone was mad at France because all the countries at the time were monarchies, and, well, I mean, the ruling classes didn't want revolutionary ideas spreading to their countries, or they might be, you know, not living soon. So there was war, and in 1795, the French Republic conquered the fort of Luxembourg. So the control of it went to the French, and later in 1799 to Napoleon, who became the de facto dictator of France. Now, despite Napoleon being emperor, he was never emperor of a territory, he was only emperor of a people. The French people. He was emperor of the French. And he never took the title Duke of Luxembourg, so for 20 years Luxembourg kind of didn't have a monarch. But these were the people in charge, so think of it as you will. And it was after Napoleon happened, Luxembourg and Belgium were given to the Netherlands because the Netherlands was supposed to act as a strong buffer state in between France and Germany. And also Austria couldn't defend that territory, as was proven, so they kind of didn't want it. So that meant William II, but no one ever called him that. Or the first king of the Netherlands became monarch of Luxembourg. It actually became the Grand Duke of Luxembourg because it was part of a compromise. Even though Luxembourg was literally smaller as a Grand Duchy, it was literally bigger as a duchy. Like, it was bigger like 20 years ago. And William I has the family right to rule from his mother, who was a Prussian princess who was the descendant of Anne of Austria, who was the great-granddaughter of Charles I or IV. Anne of Austria's daughter married John Cicero, who was an elector of Brandenburg. So after John Cicero came 6 electors and 2 kings, who were also electors, until King Frederick William I of Prussia had a son, Prince Augustus William, who had a daughter, Wilhelmina, who had William I of the Netherlands. So anyways, after William I came William II, the Dutch monarch remained as monarch of Luxembourg, even though Luxembourg became independent. It was a personal union. Then came William III, and then would have came Wilhelmina in 1890, but Luxembourg didn't allow women in its line of succession because of an 18th century law that somehow still applied back then. So they had to find another monarch, and they found Adolf, who was of House Nassau-Weilburg. Yeah, the family claimed to the throne of Luxembourg because Henry V the Blonde, in the 13th century, had a second son named Waleran I of Lingy, and Waleran's descendant, Elizabeth of Lorraine, gave birth to Philip II, Count of Nassau-Weilburg. And after Philip II, Count of Nassau-Weilburg, came 12 people in this somehow neat and tidy line, until Adolf became head of the house, thus becoming Grand Duke of Luxembourg. Then after him came Guillaume IV or William IV, because Guillaume is the French spelling of the name, and then afterwards his eldest daughter Marie Adelaide, because Guillaume found a loophole in the 18th century law that allowed his daughter to succeed him. But she only reigned for 7 years from 1912 to 1919, because during the Second World War she was very pro-German and violated the promise of neutrality her country took. So many people were angry at her, and most politicians were angry at her, and most countries were angry at her, so she abdicated, having her sister Charlotte take over. Charlotte abdicated in 1964 in favor of her son Jean, and then he abdicated in 2000 in favor of his son Henry, who is the current Grand Duke of Luxembourg. Anyways, after Henri will come Guillaume, his son, and then after Guillaume will come his son, Prince Charles, who is now 18 months old. And that is the brief history of the Luxembourgish monarchy.